The morning light cut through the Seoul boardroom like a blade, casting long shadows across polished mahogany and sleek glass. 20 executives sat frozen around the conference table, their eyes locked on the presentation screen where billion-won projections glowed in cold blue light. The air conditioning hummed. Someone's phone vibrated once, then went silent. Felix saw the reflection first. His position by the eastern wall gave him the angle nobody else had, the perfect sightline into the glass partition, separating the boardroom from the outer corridor. The figure moved with purpose, extracting something dark and angular from beneath a maintenance uniform that didn't quite fit right. Felix's muscles coiled before his mind fully processed the threat. The gun cleared the man's waistband. Felix launched himself across 15 feet of polished floor, his shoulder connecting with Han Seo-Yun's chair at the exact moment the first shot shattered the glass wall. The CEO's body folded beneath his as they hit the ground, her sharp intake of breath lost in the chaos of screaming executives and splintering furniture. Felix rolled, positioning himself between her and the shooter, his hand already reaching for the collapsible baton at his ankle. 2 more shots. The projector exploded in a shower of sparks. Someone overturned the conference table. Security burst through the main doors 3 seconds too late, their weapons drawn but their target already fleeing down the corridor. Felix stayed locked over Seo-Yun, counting heartbeats, calculating angles, waiting for the secondary threat that often followed the first. Nothing came. "Get off me," Seo-Yun's voice cut through the pandemonium, sharp as broken glass. "Now!" Felix released her and stood in one fluid motion, his eyes still scanning the room for additional threats. Blood roared in his ears, but his breathing remained controlled, measured. This was what 14 years of training bought you, the ability to almost die and still count your respirations. Seo-Yun rose to her feet, brushing glass fragments from her tailored black suit. Her hair had come loose from its severe bun, falling across one side of her face, but her expression remained carved from ice. She straightened her collar, examined a small cut on her palm, then turned to face the chaos of her executive team with a kind of composure that built empires. "Meeting adjourned," she announced, her Korean crisp and final. "Security will escort you to the lower conference room. Nobody leaves the building until we know exactly what happened here." The executives stumbled towards the exits, guided by security personnel who looked rattled despite their tactical gear. Felix remained still, cataloging details. The trajectory of the shots, the hesitation in the shooter's stance that suggested inexperience with the weapon, the way the maintenance uniform bunched at the shoulders, indicating it was borrowed or stolen. Seo-Yun turned to him, too, once the room emptied, her dark eyes calculating. "You're the American." "Yes, ma'am. They told me you were former military. They didn't mention you had a savior complex." She walked to where her chair lay sideways on the floor, studying the bullet hole in the leather headrest at exactly the height where her skull had been, moments before. "Or exceptional reflexes. Just doing my job. Your job is executive protection, Mr. Felix, not tackling me like a linebacker." She crouched, examining something on the floor. "Though I suppose being alive is preferable to maintaining dignity." Felix said nothing. He'd learned long ago that silence was often the best response when people were processing trauma through sarcasm. Seo-Yun stood, holding a small piece of brass, the casing from one of the rounds. She turned it over in her fingers, her expression unreadable. "How did you see him?" she asked quietly. Reflection in the glass. He was trying to stay low, but his angle was wrong. Security didn't see him. The cameras didn't catch him until he fired. Her eyes locked onto his, searching for something. "You saw him before he drew the weapon." It wasn't a question. Felix held her gaze, recognizing the intelligence behind it, the kind of sharp, ruthless calculation that didn't miss details. This woman hadn't built a tech empire by being naive or trusting. She was already running scenarios, testing variables, looking for the pattern that didn't fit. "I notice things," Felix said simply. "Everyone notices things, Mr. Felix. You noticed something nobody else in this room saw coming." She dropped the casing into her palm, closing her fist around it. "Which makes you either extraordinarily good at your job or extraordinarily involved in what just happened." The accusation hung in the air between them, cold and precise. Felix felt the weight of it, understood the logic behind it. In her position, he'd think the same thing. The new security contractor, brought in less than a week ago, somehow perfectly positioned to prevent an assassination attempt that bypassed every other layer of protection. "Think whatever you need to think," Felix replied, his voice level, "but right now, you need to move. That shooter didn't work alone, and whoever sent him is going to want confirmation you're dead. When they don't get it, they'll either try again or assume you're in lockdown. Either way, staying in this building is a mistake." Seo-Yun's expression flickered, just for a moment, with something that might have been uncertainty. Then the ice reformed, harder than before. "This is my building, my company. I don't run." "You don't run from competitors or hostile takeovers," Felix said. "This is different. This is someone who wants you dead badly enough to send an amateur with a gun into your executive boardroom in broad daylight. That's either desperation or a message, possibly both." She turned away from him, walking to the shattered window that overlooked downtown Seoul. 60 floors below, the city sprawled in all directions. Steel and glass and endless concrete, a monument to ambition and wealth. Her reflection in the remaining glass showed a woman in absolute control, but Felix caught the slight tremor in her hand before she clasped both behind her back. "My head of security will investigate," she said. "We'll review all footage, run background checks on every person who had access to this floor today. Someone will talk, and when they do, we'll know who's responsible." "Your head of security let an armed man in a stolen uniform get within 20 feet of you," Felix pointed out. "Maybe he's not the best person to handle this investigation." Seo-Yun spun to face him, her eyes blazing. "Director Kwon has been with this company for 12 years. His loyalty is beyond question." "Everyone's loyalty is beyond question until the bullets start flying." Felix kept his voice neutral, professional. "I'm not saying he's dirty. I'm saying someone on your security team either missed something critical or allowed it to happen. Until we know which, trusting the existing infrastructure is a risk." The tension in her shoulders suggested she'd already reached the same conclusion, but didn't want to admit it. Pride was a luxury, but Felix had seen it get people killed more often than stupidity or bad luck. Seo-Yun struck him as someone who'd built her entire identity around control and certainty. Admitting vulnerability would feel like defeat. "What do you suggest?" she asked finally, the question costing her something. "Let me do a full security audit. Independent assessment. No interference from your existing team. Give me 72 hours to map out who had access, who had opportunity, and who had motive." Felix moved closer, lowering his voice. "And in the meantime, you change your patterns. Different car, different routes, different schedule. Make yourself unpredictable. I have 80 meetings scheduled this week. Cancel them. I'm finalizing a merger worth 300 billion won. You can't finalize anything if you're dead." The bluntness landed like a slap. Seo-Yun's jaw tightened, but Felix saw the moment she accepted the reality of her situation. She was brilliant, driven, and possibly the most controlled person he'd ever met, but she wasn't stupid. Someone had just tried to kill her in her own boardroom. The game had changed. 72 hours, she said. "After that, I expect answers." Felix nodded once. already mentally cataloging everything he'd need to do. Review security footage, interview personnel, trace the shooter's entry point, analyze the weapon for serial numbers or procurement patterns. 3 days wasn't much time, but he'd worked with less. Director Kwon entered the boardroom, flanked by 2 tactical officers. The security director was a compact man in his late 40s, his face set in professional concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. Felix noted the way he looked at Seo-Yun first, then at the damage, then finally at Felix himself, a hierarchy of priorities that was either perfectly appropriate or subtly revealing. "Ma'am, we need to move you to the secure floor," Kwon said in Korean. "The building is in full lockdown, but—" "No lockdown," Seo-Yun interrupted. "I'm leaving." Kwon's expression flickered with surprise. The protocols failed, Director. Someone brought a loaded weapon past all our checkpoints and security measures and nearly succeeded in killing me. Her voice carried the kind of authority that ended arguments before they began. "Mr. Felix will be conducting an independent review of our security infrastructure. You will provide him with whatever access he requires." The look Kwon gave Felix was pure ice wrapped in professional courtesy. "Of course, ma'am, though I should mention that our preliminary investigation has already begun. We've identified the shooter as a contracted maintenance worker who—" "Was he working alone?" Felix asked. Kwon's attention shifted to him, reassessing. "We're still determining that." "Then your preliminary investigation hasn't told us anything useful." Felix kept his tone neutral, but firm. "How did he get the gun into the building? Who modified his access credentials? Why did the cameras in the North Corridor conveniently malfunction 10 minutes before he appeared? Those are the questions that matter." The silence that followed felt like a standoff. Kwon's professional mask slipped just enough to show irritation before reforming into polite acknowledgement. "Valid questions. We're pursuing all leads." "Pursue them faster," Seo-Yun said, "and send me the complete personnel files for everyone who had access to the executive floor today. Everyone, including senior security staff." That landed like a bomb. Kwon's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Ma'am, if you're suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything, Director. I'm being thorough." She moved toward the door, her heels clicking against the debris-strewn floor with a kind of confidence that refused to acknowledge fear. "Mr. Felix, you're with me. We're leaving through the underground garage." Felix fell into step beside her, maintaining the proper distance for a bodyguard while staying close enough to react to any threat. Behind them, he heard Kwon issue sharp orders in Korean to his team. The words were clipped, professional, but Felix caught the undercurrent of barely contained frustration. They took the private elevator down, 42 floors of weighted silence. Seo-Yun stared at the digital display counting down floor numbers, her reflection distorted in the polished steel doors. Felix watched the edges of the elevator car, listening for the telltale grinding of tampered cables or the electronic whine of hacked controls. Nothing seemed off, but his instincts remained on high alert. "You think it's someone inside," Seo-Yun said without looking at him. "Statistically, most successful assassination attempts involve inside help. That's not an answer." "Yes," Felix said simply. "I think someone on your team is either compromised or complicit." The elevator doors opened onto the underground parking structure, a cavern of concrete and fluorescent lights that turned everything gray and flat. 3 black SUVs idled near the private entrance, engines running, security personnel stationed at strategic points. The formation looked professional, but Felix immediately spotted the weak points. Blind angles where the concrete pillars created dead zones. Overhead pipes that could conceal remote surveillance. Exit routes that would bottle them into kill zones if blocked. "We're not taking those vehicles," Felix said. Seo-Yun stopped walking. "Those are my cars." "Which everyone knows, including whoever just tried to kill you." Felix pulled out his phone, sending a quick text to his secondary contact, a logistics specialist he'd worked with in Afghanistan, who now ran a discreet transportation service in Seoul. "We need something they won't recognize. You're being paranoid. I'm being alive, and I'm keeping you that way too." For a long moment, Seo-Yun simply stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, incredibly, she laughed, a short, sharp sound that held no humor. "3 days ago, I was choosing between 2 merger proposals and deciding whether to fire my VP of operations. Now I'm hiding in my own parking garage, while some American ex-soldier tells me my entire security apparatus might be compromised." "Welcome to Wednesday," Felix said. His phone buzzed with a confirmation. "Car will be here in 8 minutes. Silver Hyundai, civilian plates. No obvious security modifications. The driver is someone I trust." "But you don't trust my people." "I don't trust anyone I haven't vetted personally. No offense." "Plenty taken." But she moved away from the waiting SUVs, following him deeper into the parking structure where the shadows grew thicker and the security cameras had larger gaps in coverage. "Where are we going?" "Safe house, not one of your corporate properties. Somewhere nobody in your organization knows about." Felix kept moving, his eyes constantly scanning. "You'll hate it. No luxury, no amenities, nothing that could be traced back to you or your company. Just 4 walls and security." "How long?" "Until I know who wants you dead and why." They reached the far corner of the structure where Felix had scouted an emergency exit during his first week on the job. Standard protocol. Always know 3 ways out of any location. The door was supposed to be alarmed, but Felix had already disabled that on day 2. Some security measures were designed to keep people in, not protect them. "You planned this," Seo-Yun observed, watching him work the door mechanism. "You've been preparing for exactly this scenario." "I prepare for every scenario. That's why you hired me." "I hired you because the agency said you had an impeccable record and could blend into corporate environments." She paused. "They didn't mention you were this paranoid. The paranoid ones are the only ones who survive." The door clicked open, revealing a maintenance stairwell that smelled of concrete dust and machine oil. "After you." They descended 3 levels in silence, their footsteps echoing off bare walls. Felix listened for pursuing footsteps or the telltale click of a door opening above them, but heard nothing except their own movement and the distant rumble of the building's infrastructure. At the bottom level, another door led to a service corridor that connected to the building's loading docks. The silver Hyundai pulled up exactly on time, driven by a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and the calm expression of someone who'd seen too much to be surprised by anything. Minji had been extracting people from bad situations since before Felix was born, first as a military intelligence officer, now as a freelance specialist in discreet transportation and logistics. "Felix," she said in English as he opened the rear door for Seo-Yun, "your client looks expensive." "She is. We need clean movement, no stops, variable route to the Itaewon location." "The building with the bad plumbing?" "That's the one." Minji nodded, already pulling away from the curb before Felix fully closed the door. She drove with the kind of calm competence that came from decades of experience, taking turns that seemed random, but followed a pattern designed to expose any tail. Felix watched through the rear window, cataloging vehicles, noting repeat appearances, calculating probabilities. Beside him, Seo-Yun sat rigid, her hands folded in her lap, her expression locked somewhere between fury and shock. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, leaving behind the reality of what had almost happened. Felix had seen it before. The delayed reaction, the moment when survival instinct gave way to genuine comprehension of mortality. "Do you need anything?" he asked quietly. "Water, food, a moment to, "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. Nobody was fine after almost dying. But Felix recognized the tone, the desperate need to maintain control, to not show weakness, to treat this like any other business problem that could be solved with enough intelligence and determination. He'd used the same strategy himself once upon a time before therapy and distance taught him that acknowledging fear wasn't the same as surrendering to it. "Okay," he said simply, and left it alone. They drove for 40 minutes, weaving through Seoul's late morning traffic, taking highways and back streets in equal measure. Minji knew her craft. Every turn served multiple purposes. Every stop waited for the perfect gap in traffic. By the time they pulled into the underground garage of a nondescript apartment building in Itaewon, Felix was confident they hadn't been followed. The safe house occupied, the fourth floor of a building that had seen better decades. The elevator groaned as it climbed, and the hallway carpet was the kind of industrial beige that existed in every aging building worldwide. Felix had chosen this location specifically because it was aggressively ordinary, the kind of place nobody would associate with a woman who ran a multi-billion-won corporation. Inside, the apartment was clean but Spartan. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with basic appliances, and a living room furnished with the kind of second-hand furniture that looked comfortable without being memorable. The windows faced an interior courtyard rather than the street, and Felix had already installed additional locks, a smartphone, and a basic surveillance system during his prep work. Seo-Yun stood in the center of the living room, taking in her surroundings with the expression of someone who'd just been transported to an alien planet. "This is your idea of a safe house? This is a place nobody will think to look for you," Felix replied, engaging the door locks and checking the window seals. "No security company contracts, no corporate leases, no paper trail connecting it to you or your business. Just a short-term rental under a name that doesn't exist in any database. It's horrible. It's safe." She walked to the window, looking out at the courtyard where laundry hung from balconies and children's toys lay scattered near a small playground. "I need to contact my executive team. They'll be panicking." "No contact for 24 hours. Seo-Yun spun to face him. "Absolutely not. I have a company to run." "You have a company that will survive 1 day without you," Felix said firmly. "Right now, the only thing that matters is keeping you alive long enough to figure out who wants you dead. That means going dark. No calls, no emails, no communication that could be traced or intercepted. You're being realistic. Whoever tried to kill you knows it failed by now. They're regrouping, planning the next attempt or figuring out where you went. Every communication you make is a potential vector for tracking your location." Felix moved to the kitchen, checking the supplies he'd stocked earlier. 24 hours. Then we reassess." The look she gave him could have frozen nitrogen. "I'm not accustomed to taking orders." "I'm not giving orders. I'm telling you how to stay alive. There's a difference." For a long moment, they stared at each other across the small living room. 2 people locked in a battle of wills, neither accustomed to backing down. Felix recognized the danger in this moment. Push too hard, and she'd shut him out completely. Don't push hard enough, and she'd get herself killed through sheer, stubborn pride. "Look," he said, softening his tone slightly, "I understand this is your worst nightmare. Loss of control, forced isolation, depending on someone you barely know. But right now, I'm the only person in this entire city you can absolutely trust, because I'm the only one with no connection to your company, your competitors, or your personal life. Use that. Let me do my job." Seo-Yun's shoulders dropped fractionally, the first genuine sign of surrender Felix had seen from her. She moved to the worn couch and sat down, looking suddenly smaller than her reputation suggested. 24 hours. Then I need to know what's happening with my company." "Agreed." Felix pulled out his laptop and set it up on the small dining table. already pulling up the encrypted files he'd started compiling on her security team. Someone had tried to kill Han Seo-Yun, and in his experience, the people closest to you were always the most dangerous. Time to find out which one of her trusted advisors wanted her dead. If you're invested in this story and want to see Felix uncover the conspiracy, drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Who do you suspect is behind the assassination attempt? The hours passed in focused silence. Felix worked through personnel files, security logs, and building access records, building a timeline of everyone who'd been near the executive floor in the 48 hours before the attack. Seo-Yun sat on the couch with a notepad, making lists from memory. Enemies, competitors, disgruntled former employees, anyone with motive to want her dead or her company destroyed. Around 3 in the afternoon, Felix looked up from his laptop. "Tell me about Director Kwan." Seo-Yun didn't raise her head from her notes. 12 years with the company. Started as a junior security officer. Worked his way up through competence and loyalty. He's thorough, professional, and has prevented at least 3 serious breaches I know about. Family? Wife, 2 children. They live in Gangnam. Comfortable but not excessive lifestyle. Financial troubles? Not that I'm aware of. We pay our security staff well. Felix made a note. What about the merger you mentioned? Who stands to lose if it goes through? That got her attention. Seo-Yun set down her notepad, her expression shifting to the focused intensity he'd seen in the boardroom earlier. The Hansung deal. We're acquiring their AI division and folding it into our infrastructure. It's been in negotiation for 8 months. Who's against it? Internally? Nobody. It's a strategic win across the board. She paused. Externally, Hansung's competitors would prefer we didn't suddenly control 60% of the Korean AI market. And some of our own shareholders think we're overextending. Names. Park Industries has been vocal about market consolidation concerns. Chairman Park even filed a complaint with the Fair Trade Commission, though it went nowhere. Seo-Yun stood, moving to the window again. Restless energy radiated from her, a woman used to constant motion, forced into stillness. But Park wouldn't resort to assassination. That's not his style. Everyone has a style until the stakes get high enough. You don't know these people. I know people generally, Felix replied, and I know that billions of one make even honorable people consider dishonorable options. His phone buzzed with an incoming message. Felix checked it, his expression hardening as he read the encrypted text from Min-ji. The shooter had been found dead in a holding cell at police headquarters. Apparent suicide by hanging. The body was discovered 40 minutes after his arrest. What is it? Seo-Yun asked, reading his reaction. Felix turned the phone to show her the message. He watched the color drain from her face as she processed the implications. Someone had enough reach to kill a suspect inside police custody, which meant they had either law enforcement connections or resources that could compromise them. This wasn't a lone actor, Seo-Yun said quietly. This is organized. Yes. And they're willing to kill witnesses. Also yes. She wrapped her arms around herself, a rare display of vulnerability that disappeared almost as quickly as it appeared. You said 72 hours. I'm starting to think that might not be enough time. Felix saved his work and closed the laptop. Tell me about your family. Parents, siblings, extended relatives. Anyone who might have claims on your company or inheritance. The question hung in the air like an accusation. Seo-Yun's expression shuttered completely, her face becoming the mask of polite neutrality that corporate titans used to hide everything from competitors and journalists. My family's not involved, she said flatly. You don't know that. I know my family. Do you? Felix stood, moving closer but maintaining respectful distance. Because from where I'm standing, someone just tried to kill you in a way that suggests significant planning, inside access, and enough resources to eliminate witnesses in police custody. That's not random violence or business competition. That's personal. Seo-Yun turned away from him, her reflection visible in the window glass. My father built this company from nothing. He died 8 years ago and left it to me. My mother lives in Jeju Island and hasn't been involved in business operations in over a decade. I have one brother, Han Min-jae, who runs his own pharmaceutical company. We're not close, but we're not hostile. What about your father's will? Any contested provisions? Everything was straightforward. I inherited the company. Min-jae got equivalent value in liquid assets and property. There was no conflict. Felix heard the slight hesitation in her voice, the pause that suggested information being held back. But nothing. The inheritance was settled years ago. Seo-Yun. He used her first name deliberately, breaking the professional distance to force genuine connection. If you want me to protect you, I need all the information, even the uncomfortable parts. She remained silent for a long moment, her shoulders tight with tension. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. Min-jae thought he should have inherited the company. He was older, male, more traditionally suited for leadership in my father's generation's eyes. When the will was read and everything went to me, he challenged it. The legal battle lasted 18 months before the courts ruled in my favor. How long ago was this? 6 years. And your relationship since then? Polite when necessary, distant otherwise. He married well, built his own success, moved on. Seo-Yun turned back to face Felix. But Min-jae wouldn't try to kill me. That's not who he is. 6 years is a long time to nurse resentment, Felix observed, especially if he felt cheated out of what he believed was rightfully his. You're wrong. Maybe, but I need to check anyway. The anger in her eyes was sharp and immediate. I said no. My family is off limits. Then you're going to make my job a lot harder. They stood in the small living room, locked in another standoff, the tension thick enough to cut. Felix understood her resistance. Admitting that family might be involved meant acknowledging a betrayal deeper than business rivalry or professional competition. But sentiment got people killed, and he hadn't kept clients alive for 14 years by respecting emotional boundaries more than tactical necessities. I'm going to investigate your brother, Felix said quietly. You can cooperate and help me do it efficiently, or you can refuse and I'll do it anyway, less efficiently, but still effectively. Your choice. Seo-Yun's hands clenched into fists at her sides. You work for me. I work to keep you alive. Sometimes that's the same thing. Sometimes it's not. The silence stretched between them, loaded with implications neither wanted to voice. Finally, Seo-Yun moved past him toward one of the bedrooms, her movements stiff with barely contained fury. Do whatever you need to do, she said without looking back. But when you find out you're wrong about Min-jae, don't expect an apology. The bedroom door closed with controlled force, not quite a slam, but close enough to make the point. Felix stood alone in the living room, listening to the sounds of the building around them. Somewhere above, a television played Korean dramas at high volume. Below, someone practiced violin with more enthusiasm than skill. Normal sounds, ordinary life, continuing despite the fact that someone powerful and desperate wanted Han Seo-Yun dead. Felix returned to his laptop and opened a new search window, typing in Han Min-jae's name. Time to see what skeletons hid in the family closet. The research took hours, extending well past sunset. Felix ordered food delivery using a burner phone and a fake address 2 buildings over, then intercepted it himself to avoid giving anyone direct access to their location. Seo-Yun emerged from the bedroom, long enough to eat cold noodles in silence, before retreating again. The tension between them felt like a living thing, uncomfortable but necessary. What Felix found about Han Min-jae was troubling precisely because it wasn't obviously incriminating. The man ran a successful pharmaceutical company, made all the right charitable donations, attended the appropriate social functions. His marriage to the daughter of a prominent politician had been celebrated in all the society pages. On paper, he was the model of respectable success. But Felix had learned to read between lines that most people didn't even know existed. Min-jae's pharmaceutical company had experienced unusual growth in the past 3 years. New contracts, expanded production facilities, aggressive market expansion. The funding for that growth was murky, traced through investment firms and holding companies that seemed designed to obscure the original source of capital. More interesting were the rumors on industry message boards and business forums. Whispers about Min-jae's company being positioned to benefit significantly if certain regulations were relaxed or certain competitors faced unexpected difficulties. Nothing concrete, nothing provable, but a pattern that suggested someone with influence was clearing obstacles from his path. Felix pulled up a photo of Han Min-jae from a recent charity gala. The resemblance to his sister was striking. Same sharp features, same intelligent eyes, same carefully composed expression that revealed nothing. But where Seo-Yun's face held steel determination, her brother's showed something else. Calculation, patience, the look of someone who knew how to wait for exactly the right moment. Around midnight, Seo-Yun emerged from the bedroom again, wearing the same clothes from earlier, but looking rumpled and tired in a way that made her seem more human. She poured a glass of water from the kitchen tap and stood drinking it slowly, her back to Felix. "Found anything?" she asked without turning around. "Your brother is either very smart or very lucky. Maybe both. That's not evidence of murder." "No, but it's interesting context." Felix closed the laptop, giving her his full attention. His company has grown aggressively in the past 3 years, funded by sources that are deliberately obscured. He's also been positioning himself to benefit from market conditions that would require your company to face significant challenges, or your AI merger to fail. Seo-Yun set down the glass with careful precision. Min-jae is ambitious. He always has been. That doesn't make him a killer. It makes him someone with motive if your death would create opportunities for him. And how exactly would my death help his pharmaceutical business? Felix had been waiting for this question, and he didn't particularly like the answer he'd constructed. If you die without a clear succession plan, your company faces immediate chaos. Stock price drops, merger talks stall, strategic initiatives freeze, while the board fights over control. In that environment, a smart competitor could make moves that would be impossible otherwise. Buy up shares at discount prices, poach key personnel, acquire assets from desperate sellers. You're describing basic opportunistic business strategy. I'm describing motive, Felix corrected. Add in a 6-year-old resentment about inheritance, a wife with political connections that could smooth legal complications, and enough money to hire professionals to do the dirty work, and you've got someone worth investigating thoroughly. Seo-Yun turned to face him finally, her expression unreadable. You think my brother paid someone to kill me so he could profit from the chaos of my death? I think it's a possibility that needs to be eliminated before we can trust him. We're not close, but Min-jae is still my family. Blood matters in Korea, even when the relationship is complicated. Blood has never stopped anyone from murder, Felix said quietly. If anything, family ties make it easier because the victim never sees it coming. The words hung heavy in the small apartment. Seo-Yun walked to the couch and sat down, suddenly looking exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. When I took over the company, everyone expected me to fail. Too young, too inexperienced, too female for the old guard to accept. Min Jae was one of the few people who called to congratulate me instead of offering condescending advice. And even though we'd just finished a brutal legal battle over the inheritance, he told me he respected what our father saw in me. Said he hoped I'd prove everyone wrong. She looked up at Felix, her eyes reflecting something raw and honest. Either he meant it, or he's a better actor than I ever gave him credit for. Felix moved to sit in the chair across from her, leaning forward so he could speak quietly. I've seen siblings kill each other over far less than billions of won in corporate empires. I've seen loving parents order hits on their own children because of business disputes. The capacity for violence exists in everyone, and family connection doesn't make people immune to greed or resentment or opportunity. I know that intellectually, Seo-Yun admitted, but knowing something and accepting it about your own brother are different things, which is why I'm handling the investigation instead of you. She almost smiled at that, a brief, bitter expression that faded quickly. You're very certain about yourself. I'm alive, which means I'm doing something right. This time the smile lasted longer. Your confidence borders on arrogance. I prefer to think of it as accurate self-assessment. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the tension between them shifting into something less adversarial. Outside, Seoul continued its endless cycle, cars passing on distant streets, the low hum of the city that never fully slept. The occasional voice from neighboring apartments conducting the mundane business of ordinary life. My father used to say that trust was the most expensive commodity in business, Seo-Yun said quietly. He meant it as a warning, but I always thought he was being cynical. Now I wonder if he was just being realistic. Trust should be expensive, Felix replied. When it's cheap, it's worthless. And how much does your trust cost? More than most people want to pay. Seo-Yun studied him across the small distance between them, her expression thoughtful. You don't trust anyone, do you? I trust people who earn it. How does someone earn your trust? Felix considered the question carefully. They show me who they are through actions, not words. They demonstrate consistency between what they claim to value and what they actually do. And they prove they can handle truth even when it's uncomfortable or dangerous. That's a high bar. Lower bars get people killed. She laughed softly, the sound surprising them both. You're either the most paranoid person I've ever met or the most honest. Can't I be both? I suppose you can. Seo-Yun stood, moving back toward the bedroom. I'm going to try to sleep, though I doubt I'll be successful. Wake me if you find anything that suggests my brother is actually trying to murder me. And if I find evidence he's not involved? She paused at the bedroom door. Then I'll owe you an apology for doubting your judgment. You already doubt my judgment. True, but I'm starting to think that might be my mistake, not yours. The door closed softly this time, leaving Felix alone with his laptop and the weight of responsibility that came with keeping someone alive against unknown threats. He returned to his research, pulling up financial records and cross-referencing board memberships, looking for the connections that existed in the spaces between official documents. Around 2 a.m, he found something interesting. 3 months ago, Han Min-jae's pharmaceutical company had received a significant investment from a venture capital firm called Songbird Holdings. The firm was relatively new, established just 18 months prior, and its portfolio focused primarily on tech and biotech companies positioned for aggressive expansion. What made it interesting was that Songbird Holdings shared office space with a security consulting firm that had been investigated but never charged, in connection with corporate espionage and intimidation tactics. The investigation had stalled due to lack of evidence and witnesses who suddenly became unavailable or recanted their statements. Felix pulled up the security firm's client list, or at least the public-facing version of it. The names read like a directory of companies that had experienced convenient victories over competitors, hostile takeovers that succeeded after key opposition figures withdrew unexpectedly, regulatory battles won after investigators faced career-ending scandals, market competitions resolved when rival products mysteriously failed certification, tests, nothing illegal on paper, nothing provable in court, but a pattern that suggested professional expertise in making problems disappear. He was cross-referencing employee lists when his phone buzzed with an encrypted message from one of his contacts in Seoul's expatriate security community. The message contained a single photo attachment and 3 words: "Recognized your shooter." Felix opened the image and felt his stomach tighten. The photo showed the dead maintenance worker from the boardroom attack, but in this picture he was very much alive, standing in a group photo with 5 other men. They wore tactical gear and posed in front of an unmarked building, the kind of casual group shot that soldiers and security contractors took to commemorate deployments or training operations. The metadata showed the photo was taken 4 months ago. The location tag had been stripped, but Felix recognized the building in the background. He'd seen it in his research less than an hour ago. It was the office building that housed both Songbird Holdings and the security consulting firm with a murky reputation. The pieces were clicking together in a way Felix didn't like at all. He typed a quick response to his contact. "Need full workup on all subjects in photo. Priority rush." The reply came back almost instantly. "Expensive. Bill it to my operational account. I need this yesterday." While he waited for the information, Felix pulled up everything he could find about Songbird Holdings' founding partners. The names were impressively bland, the kind of generic corporate executives who existed on paper more than in reality. But one name caught his attention: Lee Sang-min, listed as Chief Operating Officer. 5 minutes of searching revealed that Lee Sang-min had been Han Min-jae's roommate at university. They'd maintained a friendship over the years, appearing together at various social functions and business events. Lee had even served as best man at Min-jae's wedding. Felix sat back in his chair, staring at the web of connections spreading across his laptop screen. It wasn't proof. Nothing here would hold up in court or even justify confronting Min-jae directly. But it was a pattern, and patterns told stories to people who knew how to read them. The story this pattern told was simple and ugly. Han Min-jae had positioned himself to benefit from his sister's death, had connections to people who could make that death happen, and had invested in companies that specialized in solving problems through means that existed in legal gray areas. Felix's phone buzzed again with incoming files from his contact. He opened them and began reading, his expression growing darker with each new piece of information. The 5 men in the photo with the dead shooter were all former military, all with spotty service records that suggested discipline problems or early separations. 3 had been arrested at various times for assault or weapons charges, though none of the charges had resulted in convictions. Most tellingly, all 5 had been employed by the security consulting firm within the past 2 years, working as independent contractors on projects that were never fully documented or disclosed to regulatory authorities. Felix was compiling a timeline when he heard the bedroom door open. Seo-Yun stood in the doorway, wearing a borrowed t-shirt that hung loose on her frame, her hair disheveled from unsuccessful attempts at sleep. She looked younger like this, more vulnerable, stripped of the armor that corporate leadership required. "You're still awake," she observed. "Found some things I needed to follow up on." "Bad things? Complicated things?" She moved into the living room, settling onto the couch and pulling her knees up to her chest. "Tell me." Felix hesitated. What he'd found was damning enough to warrant serious investigation. but circumstantial enough that a good lawyer could explain it all away as coincidence and misinterpretation. Telling her now would either prepare her for a difficult truth or permanently damage a family relationship based on speculation. Felix Mitiye, she said quietly. Whatever you found, I need to know. I can't protect myself if I don't understand the threat. He turned the laptop so she could see the screen, displaying the web of connections he'd mapped out. Your brother's company received significant investment from a firm that shares resources with a security consulting company. That same security consulting company employed the man who tried to kill you. Seo-Yun leaned forward, reading the information with the focused intensity she probably brought to merger documents and quarterly reports. Her expression remained carefully neutral, but Felix saw the slight tremor in her hand as she traced the connections with one finger. This could be coincidence, she said finally. It could be. But you don't think it is? I think coincidences happen, but they don't usually happen in clusters this convenient. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back, her movements agitated. You're telling me my brother paid professionals to murder me. You're telling me he sat across from me at family dinners and smiled while planning my death. I'm telling you there are connections that need to be investigated before we can rule him out or confirm his involvement. That's the same thing. No, Felix said firmly. One is certainty, the other is possibility. I deal in possibilities until evidence makes them certainties. Seo-Yun stopped pacing, her back to him, shoulders rigid. If you're right, if Min-jae is behind this, then I've misjudged everything. Our entire relationship for the past 6 years has been a performance, and I never saw it. Or I'm wrong, and your brother is being used as a patsy by people who know investigating him will distract us from the real threat. She turned to face him, hope flickering in her expression. You think that's possible? I think everything's possible until we have more information. Felix closed the laptop. Which is why I need you to do something that's going to feel like a betrayal. What? I need access to your brother's schedule, his movements, his communications, if possible. I need to see if there's a smoking gun, or if this is all coincidence and misdirection. You want me to spy on my own family? I want you to stay alive long enough to find out if your family is trying to kill you. The bluntness landed hard. Seo-Yun flinched as if physically struck, then wrapped her arms around herself in a gesture that looked like self-protection. And if I refuse? Then I investigate without your help, which takes longer and increases the risk that whoever's behind this succeeds before I identify them. You're asking me to choose between trust and survival. I'm asking you to choose survival, Felix corrected. Trust is a luxury you can't afford right now. For a long moment, Seo-Yun simply stood there, caught between competing loyalties and impossible choices. Felix had seen this before, the moment when someone's worldview collided with harsh reality and had to make space for uncomfortable truths. Some people adjusted, adapted, survived. Others broke. If I help you investigate Min-jae and you find out he's innocent, I will never forgive myself for doubting him, she said quietly. And if you don't help me investigate and he kills you, forgiveness won't matter anymore. She laughed, a broken, bitter sound. You have a talent for making terrible choices sound reasonable. It's a gift. Seo-Yun returned to the couch, sitting down heavily. I can get you his schedule. We still share access to our mother's calendar system for coordinating family visits. And Min-jae never removed me from his administrative contacts. Communications would be harder. I'd need his phone or computer access. Start with the schedule. If we see patterns that align with the attack or preparations for it, that gives us direction for deeper investigation. And if we don't find anything, then we look elsewhere. Felix moved to sit across from her again. But right now, your brother is the strongest lead we have. That doesn't make him guilty, but it makes him someone we need to understand better. Seo-Yun pulled out her phone, staring at it like it might explode. Felix noticed she'd been without it for hours, separated from the digital leash that kept most executives tethered to their companies and contacts. The withdrawal had to be significant, but she'd endured it without complaint until now. "If I turn this on, can they track it?" she asked. "Not if you let me configure it first." She handed him the phone. Felix pulled a small device from his bag, a portable signal modifier that would route her connection through multiple proxy servers and encrypt the traffic beyond standard commercial-grade protection. It wasn't perfect, but it would make tracking significantly harder and buy them time to identify any attempts. "This will slow your connection and make some apps not work properly," he warned while configuring the settings. "But it'll keep your location obscured and your communications more secure." "I don't care about apps. I care about my company." Felix handed back the phone. "Check your brother's schedule. Don't send any messages or make any calls unless we discuss it first." Seo-Yun took the phone and began navigating through screens, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Felix watched her expression shift as she accessed information. The slight frown when something surprised her, the tightening around her eyes when she found something significant. "Min-jae was in Busan the day of the attack," she said after several minutes. "There's a pharmaceutical conference there, and he's listed as giving the keynote address." "What time?" "Morning session, 9 to 11. The attack had happened at 10:30. If Min-jae was genuinely in Busan giving a speech, he had a solid alibi. But Felix had been in this business long enough to know that alibis could be constructed as carefully as any other aspect of a planned operation. "Can you verify he actually gave the speech?" Felix asked. "Photos, videos, attendee confirmations?" Seo-Yun's fingers flew across the screen. "There are photos on the conference social media. He's definitely there, on stage, speaking to a full auditorium." She turned the phone to show Felix images time-stamped at 10:15 and 10:45 that morning. Felix studied the photos carefully. They showed Han Min-jae in a sharp suit, gesturing to presentation slides behind him, engaged with an audience of several hundred people. Unless he had the ability to be in two places at once, he was physically 200 miles away when someone tried to kill his sister. "That's a strong alibi," Felix admitted. "So he's innocent. Or he hired people to do the work while establishing himself as being obviously somewhere else." Felix pulled out his own laptop again. Classic technique. Be as publicly visible as possible when the crime occurs, so nobody suspects your involvement. "You're determined to believe he's guilty." "I'm determined to follow the evidence wherever it leads." Felix pulled up flight schedules and train timetables. Did he stay in Busan overnight or return to Seoul the same day? Seo-Yun checked the calendar again. He has dinner reservations in Seoul at 7 that evening, so he would have returned that afternoon. "On what flight or train?" "I don't have access to his travel details." Felix made a note to investigate Min-jae's specific movements that day. If the man had flown private, or taken a route that allowed for a quick side trip to Seoul during the attack window, the alibi became less solid. It was unlikely, but not impossible. Plenty of criminals had been caught because they underestimated how thoroughly investigators would examine seemingly airtight alibis. His phone buzzed with another message, this time from Min-jae. The text was characteristically brief. "Vehicle spotted near your last known. Black sedan. Diplomatic plates. 2 occupants. Watching your building." Felix's blood went cold. He'd been careful about their route to the safe house, had taken every precaution he could implement on short notice. But someone had still found them, or found the building and was surveilling it on the chance they were inside. "We need to move," he said, already standing and beginning to pack up his equipment. Seo-Yun looked up from her phone, alarm replacing the exhaustion in her expression. What happened? Someone's watching this building. They might not know for certain we're here, but they're positioned to see anyone coming or going. How did they find us? That's a question we'll answer later. Right now, we need to relocate before they confirm we're here or bring reinforcements. Felix moved through the apartment with practiced efficiency, gathering the essentials and abandoning anything that couldn't be carried quickly. Seo-Yun followed his lead, her earlier resistance to taking orders evaporating in the face of immediate danger. Within 5 minutes, they were ready to move. "Where do we go?" she asked. "Somewhere more defensible. This location was meant for short-term concealment, not extended protection." Felix moved to the window, carefully checking the courtyard below without exposing himself to observation. "We need better security infrastructure and more exit options." "You have another safe house?" "I have 3 more in Seoul, plus options outside the city if we need to go that far." Felix's phone buzzed again. Minji. Second vehicle arrived. 4 total occupants now. Professional posture. Recommend immediate extraction if you're present. He texted back quickly. Need pickup. Rear service entrance in 15 minutes. The response was immediate. Confirmed. "Let's go," Felix said, moving to the door and checking the hallway through the peephole. Empty, but that could change in seconds. "Stay close, stay quiet, and if I tell you to run, you run without questioning or hesitating." Seo-Yun nodded, her face set in determined lines. Whatever fear she felt was locked down behind the same iron control that had built a corporate empire. Felix approved. Panic got people killed, but controlled fear kept them sharp. They moved through the hallway to the service stairs, avoiding the elevator that could be trapped or monitored. 4 flights down in near darkness, their footsteps echoing off concrete walls. Felix listened constantly for sounds of pursuit or ambush, his hand resting on the expandable baton that was his only weapon in a country with strict firearms regulations. The service entrance opened onto a narrow alley that smelled of garbage and standing water. A cat fled at their approach, disappearing into shadows. Felix scanned both directions, looking for the watchers Minji had warned about, calculating angles and escape routes. Minji's silver Hyundai appeared at the alley entrance exactly on time, the engine running, passenger door already opening. Felix pushed Seo-Yun toward the vehicle and followed her in, pulling the door closed as Minji accelerated smoothly away from the building. "How did they find us?" Seo-Yun asked again, once they were moving. "Several possibilities," Felix replied, watching through the rear window for pursuit. "They could have tracked us from the original building despite our precautions. They could have identified my known safe houses through investigation. Or," he paused, not wanting to voice the darker possibility. "Or what? Or someone who knows my methods told them where to look." The implication settled over the car like a weight. If someone inside Felix's own network had been compromised or corrupted, then their options for safety narrowed significantly. Every contact became suspect, every resource potentially poisoned. "Where are we going?" Minji asked from the driver's seat, her eyes constantly moving between mirrors. "The Gangnam location," Felix decided. "It's more exposed but has better infrastructure. And right now, infrastructure matters more than concealment." Minji nodded and adjusted their course, taking the kind of indirect route that added 15 minutes to the trip, but made following them exponentially more difficult. Seoul slid past outside the windows, neon signs and apartment towers, late-night restaurants still serving customers, the endless energy of a city that treated sleep as optional. Felix's mind raced through scenarios and countermeasures. Someone had found them too quickly, which meant either impressive investigative resources or inside information. Either option suggested a level of sophistication that elevated the threat significantly. This wasn't just a hired killer with a gun anymore. This was organized, well-funded, and determined. Beside him, Seo-Yun sat in rigid silence, processing the reality that running had become necessary. Felix recognized the look on her face, the moment when someone who'd always controlled their environment realized control was an illusion, and survival required adaptation to forces beyond their influence. "Talk to me about your company's security protocols," Felix said quietly. "Who has access to executive protection details?" "Director Kwan and his immediate team. My executive assistant. The head of corporate security." "Names?" Seo-Yun rattled off 4 names, all of which Felix immediately added to his mental list of people who needed thorough investigation. One of them had either deliberately compromised security or been unknowingly used to provide information to the attackers. "What about your executive assistant?" Felix asked. "How long have they been with you?" 3 years. Kim Jae-soon. Brilliant, efficient, completely trustworthy." "Nobody is completely trustworthy." Seo-Yun's jaw tightened. "Jae-sun has been offered positions at competitor companies for twice her current salary. She turned them all down out of loyalty. Or she was waiting for a better offer. You suspect everyone. Everyone who had access to information that could have been used against you," Felix clarified. "I'm not saying your assistant is guilty. I'm saying we need to verify everyone's trustworthiness rather than assuming it." The drive to Gangnam took 40 minutes of careful navigation. The new safe house occupied the top floor of a building that had been designed with security in mind: restricted elevator access, reinforced doors, and a layout that provided clear sightlines and multiple exit routes. Felix had chosen it specifically for situations where concealment failed and active defense became necessary. Minji dropped them at the building's underground garage, waiting until they were safely inside before departing with a silent wave. Felix led Seo-Yun to the private elevator that required both a key card and biometric scan, then rode up in silence as exhaustion finally began to show through her controlled exterior. The apartment was larger than the previous safe house and significantly better appointed. Modern furniture, actual art on the walls, a kitchen with appliances that looked like they belonged in the current century. Yeah, but the real value was in the security infrastructure. Cameras covering all approaches, reinforced windows, emergency communication systems, and a panic room that could sustain 2 people for 72 hours if necessary. "Make yourself comfortable," Felix said, immediately moving to check all the security systems and verify they were functioning properly. "We should be safe here for at least a few days while I continue investigating." Seo-Yun collapsed onto the couch, finally allowing the fear and exhaustion to show. "How long can we keep running?" "Until we identify who's trying to kill you and eliminate the threat." "And if we can't?" "Not an option I'm willing to consider." She laughed softly, the sound holding more despair than humor. "Your optimism is either admirable or delusional. I prefer to think of it as professional stubbornness." Felix finished his security check and moved to the kitchen, putting water on to boil. "Tea? Do I look like someone who wants tea? You look like someone who needs it." While the water heated, Felix pulled out his laptop again and began compiling everything they knew into a coherent picture. The attack itself, the dead shooter, the connections to Min Jae's associates, the surveillance at the first safe house. Each piece suggested a level of organization that required significant resources and planning. His phone rang with an encrypted call from one of his contacts in private investigation. Felix answered immediately. "Talk to me." "The security firm you asked about, Sentinel Solutions," the voice said. "They're more than just corporate espionage. Word in the community is they handle permanent solutions when clients need problems to disappear. Assassinations? Never proven, always suspected. They're good at making things look like accidents or suicides. The maintenance worker from your incident? That's sloppy by their standards, which suggests either rush job or message sending. Felix felt his stomach tighten. Who are their typical clients? High-end corporate, government contracts that don't officially exist. Wealthy individuals with complicated problems. Anyone who can afford their rates and doesn't mind working with people who have flexible ethics. Can you get me their client list? A pause. That would be extremely difficult and extremely expensive. I'll pay. Give me 48 hours. No promises. The call disconnected. Felix sat back, running calculations in his head. If Sentinel Solutions was behind the attack, they were dealing with professionals who had resources and expertise that made this situation exponentially more dangerous. These weren't amateurs who could be scared off or reasoned with. These were people who treated murder as a business service. Bad news? Seo-Yun asked from the couch. Complicated news. Felix brought her the tea, settling into a chair across from her. The security firm connected to your brother's associates is suspected of handling contract killings. Nothing proven, but enough rumors that I believe it. So Min-jae did hire them to kill me. Or someone hired them and deliberately left a trail pointing to your brother to divert suspicion from the real culprit. Seo-Yun sipped the tea, her hands trembling slightly. I don't know which possibility is worse. The second one is worse, because it means someone smart enough to frame your brother is also smart enough to stay hidden while they make multiple attempts on your life. The weight of that reality settled over them both. Felix had been in dangerous situations before. Combat zones, hostage extractions, close protection assignments that turned violent. But this felt different. This felt like hunting shadows while the shadows hunted back. I'm sorry, Seo-Yun said quietly. Felix looked up, surprised. For what? For doubting you earlier. For being difficult and resistant and treating you like an inconvenience instead of someone trying to save my life. She met his eyes, her expression stripped of its usual armor. You've been right about everything so far, and I fought you every step of the way. You're adjusting to a situation nobody should have to face. Being difficult is understandable, but not helpful. No, Felix agreed, but understandable. She managed a small smile. I'm not accustomed to being this vulnerable. It's uncomfortable. Welcome to being human. I thought I was already human. You were a CEO first, human second. Right now, those priorities have reversed whether you like it or not. Seo-Yun set down the tea and leaned back, closing her eyes. When this is over, if we survive, I'm either going to offer you a permanent position or never want to see you again. I haven't decided which. Most people choose the second option. I tend to remind them of things they'd prefer to forget. Like mortality, and the fact that control is mostly illusion. She opened her eyes and looked at him directly. Do you ever get tired of being right? Constantly, Felix said. But being wrong in my line of work tends to end badly, so I've learned to live with the burden of accuracy. This time her smile reached her eyes. You know, under different circumstances, I might actually like you. The feeling's mutual. The moment hung between them. Not quite friendship, not quite trust, but something approaching understanding. Felix recognized it as the connection that sometimes formed between people who'd faced death together and came out the other side, changed by the experience. It wasn't comfortable, but it was real in a way that most relationships never achieved. His laptop chimed with an incoming message. Felix checked it immediately, his expression hardening as he read the update from his investigative contact. The information was preliminary, but significant. Han Min-jae had made 3 large cash withdrawals in the past 2 months, totaling nearly $2 million equivalent. The withdrawals were structured to avoid reporting requirements, but collectively represented a significant movement of untraceable funds. What is it? Seo-Yun asked, reading his reaction. Felix hesitated, then turned the laptop so she could see. Your brother withdrew a lot of cash recently. The kind of money that's typically used for transactions someone doesn't want documented. He watched the color drain from her face as she read the details. Her hands clenched into fists on her lap, knuckles white with tension. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. He really might have done this. My own brother might have actually tried to have me killed. Felix had no comforting words to offer. Sometimes the truth was just brutal and necessary, and trying to soften it only delayed the inevitable reckoning. He sat in silence while Seo-Yun processed the information, watching emotions flicker across her face. Denial, anger, grief, resignation. What do we do now? She asked finally. We find proof, definitive evidence that either confirms his involvement or proves he's being framed. Felix closed the laptop, and then we decide how to handle it. If he's guilty, I want him to face justice. Legally or personally? The question was deliberate, pushing her to confront exactly how far she was willing to go. Seo-Yun's expression hardened, the vulnerability replaced by something colder and more determined. Both, she said. If Min-jae tried to kill me, I want him to pay for it in every way possible. Felix nodded, respecting her honesty even as he noted the edge of vindictiveness that had entered her voice. Betrayal by family cut deeper than any other kind. And the desire for revenge was natural. He just hoped she'd maintain enough control to let justice run its course, rather than taking matters into her own hands. Then we keep investigating, he said, and we prepare for whatever we find. Like this story? Comment below what you think will happen next, and don't forget to subscribe for more intense thrillers. The night stretched ahead of them, filled with surveillance footage to review, financial records to analyze, and connections to map. Somewhere in Seoul, someone was planning their next move against Han Seo-Yun. Felix just needed to figure out who before that move succeeded. Outside the window, the city glittered with a million lights, beautiful and indifferent to the small dramas of survival playing out within its boundaries. Felix settled in for another sleepless night, knowing that somewhere in all that data and information was the answer they needed. He just hoped they'd find it before someone found them first.